Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Denis Giannoutsos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsos.
We're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm actually going to be interviewed, and I've asked a gentleman by the name of Denis Katsanos. That's right, his name is Denis as well. And Denis has got 20 years of broadcasting experience, and he's done many interviews of people from around the world. And so it's going to be very exciting for Denis to be with me here on the show and actually interview me. Denis, welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Denis. I must admit, when you asked me to interview for the 200th show, I was really, really excited. So I'm looking forward to it. I can't believe in such a short space of time you've hit 200 episodes. Before we get into it, any memorable moments for you? Any standout moments that across the episodes? Because I've noticed in my research, you've got Christopher Luxon, John Lee Dumas, Tracy Ibarra, Travis Chappell, Joanna Macres. There's some names in there. They're just some of the ones that I listened to before we came on, and they're all outstanding, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. But I got to actually say that the first recording that I did was really, really quite special. And then to see it go live, I think that was pretty cool. And I had a deadline to get it go live. Of course, we're in lockdown over a year ago, and I thought, well, I want to launch it, so I decided to do that. But I pushed the production team to help me get it go live, and they said we've never done it this quick before, and it was pretty quite cool for it to happen. And for it to go and see it to come to life has been really special. Doing the 50th episode, the 100th episode has been very special indeed. And now the 200th episode and having you join me on this session is pretty cool, man.
I think it's just absolutely amazing. And I must admit, I've listened to a lot of, not every single podcast, but some of the lessons in there. I was listening to the resilience one just the other day, and I thought, yep. There's definitely a lot of lessons in there for me. Denis, I'm going to ask you the first question you ask everyone. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born in New Zealand and grew up here, and went to school and college in New Zealand, and really grew up in the coffee industry. Mum and Dad, as you know, we were in the coffee industry. I've been in the coffee industry 61 years, which has been pretty amazing, and that's where I grew up. So at the age of 7, well, here I was behind the counter at the shop, every day after school, every weekend, school holidays, we were at the shop working, and it was really great. But you know what? That taught me a lot. And it taught me a lot about work ethic. It taught me a lot about commitment and so forth. Don't get me wrong. We did have the childhood stuff that we went to the movies and out, so forth. But there's one thing that really stuck out for me in my childhood, and there was this, that even though my dad got up and my parents got up in the morning at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to the cafe and do things like that, and then we come home at 5:30 p.m., we would have dinner. In daylight saving, my dad was the only dad in the neighborhood that would go down to the local park with the kids to go and play cricket, touch rugby and all that sort of stuff. And it just showed me that even though he was probably really tired and all that, he was still there for us as kids, but he also wanted to go out there and enjoy it as well for him. And that just showed me that he had a very strong work ethic, but it was something that he was committed to doing as well, which was pretty cool.
Pretty outstanding. Working a 13-hour day, particularly by the time we got to sort of Friday, Saturday, I'd be spent, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for me, going to college and so forth, I've already had leadership roles throughout the whole period of time, and then into corporates, of course, and doing things around in the IT space, and then getting into leadership roles, and then converting into the coaching and leadership development stuff that I've been doing for nearly 25 years. And then I decided to go and do that full time 17 years ago, if not longer, in the HR space. And it's been fantastic.
So, Denis, you touched on, obviously, you got a taste for it younger at college and obviously through working at your parents' cafe, etc. So how did you formally get into leadership, or what was that spark or that moment that you thought, right, this is the direction I'm going to go in?
Well, I've always wanted to join the police, to be honest. And I remember every morning and every night I would go under my bed and I have these little brochures that I pulled out from the police, and I would just watch and read these magazines day in, day out. And that was something I wanted to pursue. But then I got engaged, and my fiance at the time said to me, hey, it's either the police or me, you've got to choose. And I'm like, okay. So I chose her. And of course, 10 years later, we divorced. But I think the big thing for me was there was a real big lesson for me about following your dream and making sure that you stick to something that you want to go and do. And so that was around leadership as well. But I actually remember at primary school, they pulled me aside and said that, we don't have a head boy or head girl, but if we did, it would be you. And I was like, oh, wow. And then when I went to intermediate, but into college more in particular, that's where I started leading teams. And whether it's on committees I was within the community or sporting teams and things like that, that's where a lot of that leadership side of things started for me. And then, of course, I got involved with a whole lot of other stuff and network marketing and other things too. And I learned so much about leadership. But then back in the corporate world, that's where I got to apply a lot of it. And also in the community and different things that I did, whether it was coaching, disabled children and sort of like the Paralympics type scenario, but it was for the local community and doing a lot of that kind of side of things. And it was really, really amazing to see and actually pulling that together and helping people out. So to answer your question, it's been throughout the whole of my life. It's just been there all the time. I'm the oldest of four, and I've always felt like I've had a leadership role and being the oldest and so forth. But the other three probably won't agree with that.
I don't have, knowing your brothers and sisters. Your brother and sisters. I was going to say I don't think they will.
Yeah.
Denis, one thing I've noticed about leadership is sometimes there's some people that have got fantastic potential to be a leader, but they can't get their voice heard. Is there any way to cut through? So, a group situation like you're in, for example, sports team, etc. You've got the goods, but there seems to be that sort of more extroverted person or loudmouth person or the guy that can score a few more tries than you. But as a complete package, you're probably better. And many of us might have worked for the guy that you don't want to work for and you don't know how they got the promotion because you're about 10 times better than them or lady, so to speak. Any thoughts on how you can maybe be seen a little bit more? Or
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I find that even if you're sitting in a meeting, let's take a meeting scenario of a team, you're right, there'll be the 1, 2 or 3 people in there, the extroverts out there speaking a lot, saying a lot. But sometimes I find it's just a lot of talk or a lot of noise. And that's just the way they are. They like to talk out their thinking rather than think about things. And then you've got others in the room who sometimes you go, are they in the meeting? Because they're so quiet. They don't say anything, right? And then they are analyzing things. They're more analytical people. And then what they do towards the end, they'll say something and everyone goes, huh. And it's like, it's the nugget. It's the big insight. It's the big thing. So that's one scenario. But then the other scenario is, I think it's really important that we as leaders find our voice and that we find our feet, our confidence to speak up. And I find that a lot of people aren't speaking up enough. And our teams need you to speak up. They want you to speak up. They want you to represent them. And if you have to fight for that or put it in a way that's very strong context, that people understand it, I'm going to encourage the listeners to make sure that they do that because I don't think it's been done enough, Denis.
Who was your favorite leader? It could be alive, dead, historic, and why?
I've got two, actually. One is the one I've already mentioned, which is Dad, right? Being that strong work ethic and the commitment. And, he's turning 80 coming up in a few months' time, and he's still getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning. He's still at the door by 10 past 6 in the morning. He's still walking to the roastery and doing what he needs to do. And he works and he's just loving it. But he just shows that he's committed again, the work ethic and nothing phases him. He just gets on with it, which is pretty cool. And then the other one is my grandfather. So my name is Dionysios in Greek, and that's his name too. So I was the first one of the grandchildren named after him. And in a small island in Greece below Corfu, and Prince Philip, of course, was born in Corfu. And so my grandfather on the island was the president of the island for about 28 years, and kind of guy who would go to the mainland to fight for the people and the businesses in the island. And heard a lot about him, and the family is saying, because I've only spent of all my life probably only about 9 months with him, so about 6 months with him when I was the age of 5, and then 3 months with him when I was the age of 21. And then I actually did spend another month, I think, after that too, after I got married. But the guy was the kind of guy who would actually say things and would actually have a voice to say things. And that's going back to the other question you asked before, right? And so he did make sure that he was heard, but not only did he say things, but he was actually heard what he was actually saying. And that's a real key. And the family is saying that the way he speaks, the way he stands, the way he portrays himself and all that when he was alive, I'm doing exactly the same thing. Apparently they reckon it's their dad living again. I'm like, wow. So it's pretty cool. So it's interesting. So I think it's those two who have been very, very influential for me as a person.
It's interesting you say that, Denis, because a couple of things that you've touched on in a couple of the podcasts that I've listened to are attitude, the 6 inches between your ears, and your dad and your grandfather, the time that I spent with them, always really, really positive, even in adversity when there's, things, some real challenges that they're facing. And also the power of words, which is another one that you've talked about, is how they speak to you. Like when Lambros, your dad, talks to you, you really listen and you hang on every word because of the way that he says it to you. And I feel that you have very similar traits in that. Is that something that you think that you've picked up from both of them?
Yeah, I think I have. And, the listening is, everyone has to work at it, right? For sure. And because of my coaching experience and being able to work with people, it's actually listening to what they say and then listening to what they're not saying. And listening to what they're not saying is very powerful, for sure. Going back to the 6 inches between your ears, I think that's really important. It was all about attitude. And a lot of things in life are out of our control. But there are two things that are in our control: our attitude and the way we react to things. And then the second piece is where we're going next. And it's the going next that's really, really important. Rather than freezing or being stuck there because you don't know what's happening, is just getting on with things and moving forward. Now, easy for me to say it, but not always easy to do, right? So it's an interesting dilemma for a lot of people, for sure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.